Hi, everyone. Welcome to a bonus episode of a live stream with me, Dr. Aparajita Jeetagunta, or AJ, or Dr. AJ, however you want to call me. I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, strategist, and advisor. And I've realized, I'm calling myself that more and more because that is actually more of what I'm doing. And I just happen to do that through leadership development. So that's just been really an interesting little twist in my journey lately. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about Indian Americans, my people. I'm here to talk to my people tonight. And I am going to try and be extremely careful with my words because I also am being very intentional with this particular video. So I am going to talk a little bit slower. And before I say anything else about this topic, please let me help you understand that what I'm about to say, I am not coming from a place of judgment. It's actually incredibly difficult for me to do this live. Like my heart is pounding as I'm thinking about this because of any potential blowback I already am sort of anticipating in my head, which doesn't even make sense. But that is the nature of, anxiety in talking about sensitive topics, right? But at the end of the day, I have to stand in my truth. That's the only thing I can do, and I have to walk my truth. So here I am doing this really difficult video. And I'm not coming from a place of judgment because I'm one of the community. I am an Indian American woman. And so I know we can do better than what is going on right now because I am one of the community. So again, not from a place of judgment. Thank you for joining in. For whomever is joining in, please feel free to comment. It's always a little bit more reassuring to know that somebody is out there and that I'm not just speaking into the abyss. So thank you so much for that. Today, what I really want to talk about is just the baggage that we as Indian Americans need to unpack. And I don't mean just the colorism, casteism, classism, all of these other, isms that we already know exist within the Indian American society, within the Indian society in India, and also within the Indian American society here. I get it. We are all selective immigrants. And at the end, and yes, the majority of us, our parents have sacrificed huge amounts and huge deals for us to accumulate the wealth that we have, for us to live these comfortable middle-class lives that we have. And so, yes, in a very real sense, it makes sense that as a community, we want to protect those middle-class interests and stand with power structures. So that is a whole suite of luggage to unpack on its own. That is not actually what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how, what I'm seeing on social media really actually brings out our hypocrisy as Indian Americans. And what do I mean by that? I really just mean that there are so many Indian Americans and South Asians and people of other communities who have consistently been doing the work towards equity and inclusion. And yes, I did not include Black communities or Black leaders in that because they've always been doing this work. They've set the path for us. They are the pioneers. We join the conversation. There is absolutely no denying that. And what I want to talk about today in terms of the baggage we have to unpack doesn't actually take away from the Black Lives Matter movement or the greater movement towards equity and justice. It is how we don't even realize how we are being hypocritical about this whole issue in showing our support in certain ways. I know that I'm being really cryptic right there, but I'm going to get into it. What I mean by this is I see, South Asians, Indian Americans, and, I see other communities doing this work too, but I'm only going to speak on my community because that is what I'm comfortable with. I see people in my community starting to get vocal about the Black Lives Matter movement and about and starting to have conversations about why the all lives matter phrasing and thought is extremely problematic. For every single person who is speaking up from the Indian American community, thank you from the bottom of my heart for speaking up, and keep speaking up. Don't stop. That being said, how are you elevating other voices within your own community who have been consistently doing this work? Not just because it is currently trending. I happen to know for a fact that I have Indian American friends who have been doing this work. How much support do they get from their communities? How many times do their posts get shared? How many times do their words even get heard? Not that many. I know I've been subject to that in the past as well, to the point where I actually don't expect any support from my community. I don't, it's gotten, there really was a time where I was like, I know I'm doing this as an Indian American for Indian Americans, for our equity and our belongingness and our leadership development. But I also know that it is going to be very, very few people who actually even acknowledge any of that. And anybody that knows me knows I have such an incredibly tough skin that no skin off my back, rolled off my back. But the emotional labor in doing that, every single person that is doing this work consistently, every single person that is speaking up, every single person that is an activist, especially within an Indian American community, while unpacking our own, again, casteism, colorism, and all of these other isms, it takes an extraordinary amount of strength to say, this is what I'm going to use my voice for, without co-opting other powerful voices in the movement, but adding my voice to the movement. And when somebody does that, please show them support. Because if we can't even show our own community members support, then what is the value of our words when we do put these posts up saying Black Lives Matter, or that we are standing for equity and justice and belongingness, or that love is love? When we don't actually model that within our community with each other, how are we actually participating in an authentic way towards equity and justice as a larger social movement? What is the value of our words then when we as Asian Americans say Black Lives Matter? Now, I'm not saying that the value of our words is diminished or that the power of our words is diminished, but I am talking about the underlying mindset there, right? I'm talking about the underlying mindset where, why is it more okay to talk about external things without even unpacking our internal baggage, without supporting each other positively internally? And I know I'm not the only Indian American person out there feeling this. Many people in our particular brown communities who have been doing this activism work, they feel isolated. They feel tired. They feel exhausted. So while we are supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, which is critical, supporting our brethren within our community who are doing this work is also critical. And let me give you a really concrete example of what I mean. If I bring in another Indian American person here who is extremely vocal and is an activist toward equity and justice and belongingness, right? And I have 40, 50, 60, 80, 200 people watch it. But if only 2 of them are from my community, how am I amplifying this person's voice within my own community? Right? If I can only go so far as my network, if my network doesn't want to amplify the voices, then what are we saying about the effort of that person? Now, let me also say that that's not why this work is being done. I completely understand that. But the nature of social media, the nature of these movements is the greater dialogue there is, the more impact we can have as a collective. This is why, even though it took protests in all 50 states, including Amish from Amish communities and witches, I mean, I never thought I would put those 2 communities in the same sentence together, let alone in a sentence that says both these communities protested for Black Lives Matter, which is great. But it took protests in 50 states and across all communities and that level of solidarity to get 4 people, but 3 people who weren't previously arrested and 1 whose charges got changed because they killed a man in 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And this man got no help. It took that amount of social movement to create this kind of a change without waiting for months and years of policy changes and legislation changes and back and forths and legal changes. All of those things have to happen. But these kind of immediate changes and Black Lives Matter turning into protests in 50 states happen because people are willing to share the message. And this message is for greater equity and belongingness. So if we actually want to stand for the truth that Black Lives Matter, if we actually want to make a difference, a positive difference, we also have to uplift each other. We also have to support each other. And in full transparency, I'm also saying this because I am going to be bringing guests onto my live stream starting next week. And their voices deserve to be heard. They have powerful voices with powerful messages. Why are we not supporting these voices internally? Why is it, and really, this got actually triggered by something earlier today, which is why this is a complete bonus impromptu live stream. There is currently an article going out there, like circulating out there, about the debt that Indian Americans owe to the Black, to the civil rights movements, to Black Americans. And every single word of that article is absolutely true. Not a single word of that article is breaking news. This kind of knowledge is something that we had access to this entire time. We just needed to do the work to learn it ourselves. But instead, what I saw? Comment after comment after comment. Wow, we never knew. Wow, we never knew. Wow, we never knew. How do we not know this? How do we not know this? And my question is, how did you not realize that? Because this article wasn't the first of its kind. I can give you 30 other articles that have come out in the last 10 years, which talked about exactly that, and they had less than 20 views. So this is not new news. This is, so what is it? Are you just now reading this because it's a trend? Or are you actually serious and committed? And again, I'm not saying that in a judgmental way, but do you see how when we don't actually do the internal work, what is the strength of the truth that we're walking in? We have to be stronger than this as a community, you guys. We have to unpack our baggage, and we have to stand strong for each other so that we can stand strong for the Black Lives Matter movement, so that we can stand strong for equity and belongingness, so that we can stand strong for the anti-Asian rhetoric that happened in the middle of COVID-19, so that we can make sure that our children have a more stable society where these kinds of conversations that are our lived experiences right now get relegated to history books of lessons that should always be learned and situations that should never be repeated. But until we unpack our garbage, our entire let me ask a question for anybody listening to this, and please comment on this, even if you're listening to this later. What does it take for you when you see another Indian American person who puts something out, who puts out an article on this, who is doing the work in this? Honestly, what does it take for you to share, to like, to put a comment on it, to check out their work? It takes no more than these other articles that are being shared now. So my question is then why now? And I'm not saying, by no means am I saying that means you should stop. Absolutely not. What I am saying is, let's continue the work and let's be consistent so that none of the people involved in this, especially our Black leaders, feel like the support is just lip service, so that they understand that there is strength behind that support. And that strength is the strength of a whole community, not just a few individuals in that community. We have to stand together as a community on this. We have to uplift Black Lives Matter movement. We have to uplift the movement for equity and belongingness. And we have to do that from within first, within ourselves and within our community. That is the only way this is going to be sustainable, right? And again, if you are just joining in, I'm not saying this as a matter of judgment at all, because 10 years ago, when I read these kinds of, when I did my learning and when I did my research and I was learning, I was terrified to speak up because I didn't even know what impact my voice could possibly have. And then top of that, I was even having people telling me that the conversations I wanted to have about equity and belongingness, that I was 10 years ahead of the curve, and that I should really tone it down and have the same conversations that were being had. I didn't want to talk in circles. I didn't. The only way we can create change is by having these new conversations about, hey, why haven't we done this before? Why is this a trend now? And great, now that this trend is starting, how can we make sure it's not just a passing trend and that it actually benefits the underlying causes of equity and belongingness, and it actually benefits the fight against oppression, and that it actually benefits Black communities and all of our Black friends and brown friends and Asian friends, that we can stand in solidarity, in strength, with power. That's my point of all of this. So please, if you see Black, Indigenous, people of color talking about this, don't let them stand alone. It's scary to do this work alone. I know, but I'm still going to do it. But don't let them stand alone. And for anybody in this space doing this work, I stand with you. And as many, with Facebook algorithms and with social media algorithms being what they are, I may miss it right at that moment, but every single person who's tagged me in it, they know I've responded to them. They know I've participated. I can pull out all of those receipts. So it's not even about me preaching to the choir about some kind of a thing. That's not what this is about. This is really, really about don't let us stand alone. We don't need to stand alone. It is when you use your voices to support every single person doing this work, when you let them know that they don't stand alone, when you add the strength of your voice to their voice, that's when this movement against systemic oppression, this movement toward equity and belongingness, that's when it gets amplified. And we have social proof of it with all of these protests. We have social proof of it with the amazing support that Black Lives Matters and all of these other initiatives towards that support Black Lives Matter, how much they've been supported. And these are coming from communities all across the spectrum. And that is the beautiful thing about it, that these are coming from communities all across the spectrum. Now imagine if we also amplified those voices within our communities towards this. If we supported the people speaking out about this, if we supported them on this, if we encouraged them on this, imagine how much more our voices can be amplified, even if we don't have 100,000 follower platforms or anything like that. It really just takes every single one of us. That's all it takes. If we can, every single one of us joining together, supporting each other in this. So again, I'm not coming from this from a place of judgment. I'm coming from this as a place of, this is an incredible opportunity for our entire community to create equity within our community and in our greater society. This is an incredible opportunity for us to build these bridges towards belongingness that are, we're lacking even within us. This is an incredible opportunity for us to actually reduce colorism, hey, why not even eradicate like casteism, classism, religious conflicts. And I'm not being idealistic here. I'm not. Yes, as people, we'll all have individual differences, but it is those differences that make us beautiful. It is those differences that make us powerful. And it is when we support those differences that we can start addressing people's unique needs, and that we can start seeing people as whole people. And if you've been a part of any of my other lives, this whole wholeness of people, it's like, that's what I keep coming back to every single time. But that's what I see missing from my own community. That's what I see missing from my own community towards my own community members. So I'm going to get off my soapbox again, but please, this is my plea to Indian Americans. Every other Indian American that you see out there, every other South Asian that you see out there, every other Black, Indigenous person of color that you see out there, lend your voice to them, lend your encouragement to them. If you don't want to do it publicly, do it privately. Just let them know that they're not alone, because this kind of work is emotionally exhausting, and it can be terrifying. It can be anxiety provoking. It definitely drains you. It drains your energy. And when our community uplifts us, nothing's going to hold us back from uplifting others. Nothing's going to hold us back from seeing our wholeness and seeing other people's wholeness and embracing it. That's about it for me. And as I said, starting next week, I am going to have guest speakers on here. So I am super excited about that. And we're going to be having conversations and unpacking all of these things. And some of the topics are going to be funny and lighter. Some of them are going to be deeper and heavier. I'm going to mix it all up because that's what life is about, you know? And if you're just joining in, or if you're joining in later, thank you so much. And I hope you start joining us starting next week. I'm excited. Bye.